And welcome, and we'll start off with a bracha. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Thank you. So, couple of thoughts here. We are starting, of course, Tazri'ah Metzora. They're combined this year because of the nature of the calendar. God willing, next year they will not be combined. Very arcane material, and we'll do the best we can. None of it's easy. But before we start that, I want to share with you something that a realization I believe that I had that was really, I thought, a lovely realization. I thanked God for it. And that is in saying the Shema a couple of days ago, it occurred to me that the first Adonai in that phrase, Shema Yisrael, might refer to the God of before we were born, right? That exists even before we came into this world, and that the Eloheinu represents the God that we experience in this world, and the second Hashem refers to after death, when we part. And that a realization that it's only, I mean, it's just one interpretation of many, but that it occurred to me that was a very, for me, that became a profound interpretation, because it also, since clearly there was a point in time we recognized that we were not around, and the idea of conception, which actually ties in, of course, to this week's Torah portion, is such a mystery, right? I mean, exactly when does life begin is not such an easy thing. And the idea of consciousness is so hard to understand. But that in some ways it was reassuring that since clearly God was around before we came into this world, and at some point we did, that that there's no reason necessarily, to disbelieve that the divine exists. And by the way, I think there are terrible consequences in terms of human behavior if one does not believe that there's a transcendent, existent one, a God of justice and a God of love that we are accountable to. When you don't have that, horrible things start to happen. At any rate, but that there is something beyond this life as well, and that it's not such a hard thing to understand. So I wanted to share that with you, and welcome. Yeah, go ahead, please.
This is why it makes sense to me, because like the Eloheinu part, so only after we're born are we acting intentionally in ways that we can be judged.
Correct.
And then the final Adonai is Adonai Echad, and that is the oneness can only be complete after this life. Then we will be, one.
Right, that's lovely. Yeah, and also the idea of have it all integrated, to realize that it's one, continuous existence that clearly transcends our understanding of it, but that we can sort of try to approach this. I never had that a realization. I mean, all these years, how many times did I say the Shema and try to say it with intention? And this was a whole new idea that never occurred to me, just out of the blue happened. So I was pretty thrilled with that.
Thank you for sharing that with us. There's two things I wanted to say. One is, that's why it says, I forget who taught this, but Alav Avecha, Alav Avecha, why should these things be on your heart? Because your heart isn't always open to things, but if it's sitting on your heart, then when your heart opens, it'll drop in. As opposed to Bilava,
Yes.
And the other thing that makes me think of is it never occurred to me to think, that actually God is mentioned 3 times in that short sentence. And what you bring out is that of course we know that 3s are everywhere. 3 things come in 3s, and 3 is a very significant number. And
right.
And whenever you see something important, there's often something three-ish about it. And it could well be because for a human being, there's before I was born, while I'm alive, and after I die. That's exactly. 3.
Right.
We are 3-ish beings.
Right. That's an exciting way of looking at it, honestly, because it also suggests a very deep, deep spiritual stroke psychological element to why the number three has, it seems to have a special significance. It's
Right,
precisely
because
because
some people believe in only two, before and during.
yes.
But the three is the element that makes it spiritual.
Yes. Well, they say, what's it? A threefold cord is not easily broken. There's all kinds of interpretations. Well, listen, this was the fun part of today's lesson. Because as we started to prepare, as I started to prepare today's lesson, I realized the profound sense of sphira and the idea of going through one's emotional uh, one's emotional side and to in terms of preparation and purification to get from freedom, the liberation of Egypt, to a point where you're willing to accept divine commandment. I mean, there's so much inside of us that unless we've done the preparation to become open, our natural instincts are to kick against this stuff. And believe me, Tazri'ah Matzorah in some ways sort of represents a real example of such mitzvot. They're so arcane and they sound maybe prejudiced or whatever. I mean, you're going to see for yourselves. Just want to also,
Right.
yeah, go ahead.
I'm just, because I'm thinking also for the Jewish people, there's before Revelation
Mm-hmm.
and there's after Revelation, where we are judged because we know what is expected of us.
Yes.
And then there's the third, that we have brought in the Mashiach.
Right, which hasn't happened for us yet.
Right, but that's the third.
Right, right. It's true. There are many, there probably quite a few triplets that we can look into. All right, let's dive into this particular week's Sedra. Let me find the screen share, and here we go. So, lots and lots and lots of Torah Temimah on this, by the way. So let's get started. Vaidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. So Hashem spoke to Moses, saying, Daber el bnei Israel, speak to the children of Israel, lemor, saying, Isha, a woman, ki Tazri'ah. And this I had to really struggle with as to how to translate this word Tazri'ah. It's helpful that Onkelos himself uses the word ta'adi, which means to conceive. And that's a really lovely translation. But it fails to get the whole sense of this word Tazri'ah, because the word zera means to seed, right? It's got to do with the word seed. And so in what sense does a woman give seed, right? We don't normally think of it that way. And there is in the Talmud, of course, tremendous amount of discussion about this. But essentially what I came up with, which may not be the right way to translate it, but this was the best I could come, is that, so to speak, the seed that the woman produces during intercourse is her, when she ovulates. Is that correct? When she
Well,
produces,
the way I look at it,
ovulation is the wrong word.
but the way I look at it, there's no conception until the seed comes in to the egg.
True. And in that sense, that's really lovely. But it really is talking, when I looked at the at Jastro, I looked at Jastro, and basically the way the rabbis are understanding this in terms of the process of conception is that the woman also provides, something towards that process, and basically the egg, that's the way they're talking about the egg that the woman provides that needs to be, that needs to be fertilized.
I think,
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it might be a little bit off the mark, because if a woman ovulates, that actual act of ovulating during intercourse, that would be a very specific moment in time. And a woman ovulates and is fertile for a period of time, some days actually.
So is there a better word that I could use? I'm very open to changing that.
Conceives.
Well, isn't conception that moment of the fertilization of, isn't that doesn't conception describe, again, I'm a student,
Is it,
and it's
then
not that. They're not talking about that.
then
They're
is
talking about that moment before ovulation, before conception, excuse me.
okay, then maybe the whole 3 words need to be revised.
Well, it's definitely during intercourse. There's no question about that. Okay.
Well, that's when conception can happen. Yeah, I mean, happens. Yeah.
But okay, and I'll tell you why I'm telling you this. There is a relatively well-known Gemara, I believe it is. It's quoted in the in the Torah Temimah, not at the very beginning, but towards the end of this. And we can do that one. We can look at it right away, at least a little after the Rashi, because I do want to do Rashi first. But you'll see the point I'm making, because they have a theory as to why a male is formed as opposed to a female is formed. Okay, and there's this suggestion by this verse about this process that at least they felt aware of. Let's keep going.
What about the word enjoin?
I think that's too broad. I mean, it's talking specifically about that part of intercourse and conception where the woman is providing the egg.
And the egg doesn't have to come forth at that moment. The egg is actually there or it's waiting.
Well, apparently that's what they're saying, something about that, and they may be talking about the time during ovulation. I don't know. This is a technical issue, clearly, right? So I'll leave it there for the moment. If we come up with a better word eventually, that's fine. But the point is, it says V'yalda Zachar, and she gives birth to a male, right? So they seem to be tired. This is where the Gemara jumps in later on, which says that apparently if the woman is the one who's Tazri'ah, she will give birth to a male. Whereas if the male provides seed first, this is the point that's of this later comment, they'll have a girl, okay? You'll see what this is talking about later. Maybe not today, but at some point, hopefully. Let's just finish this verse, right? V'tam'ah shiv'at yamim. She will be in a state of impurity for 7 days. Kimei nidat devota. So the word nidah itself has the meaning of isolation, right? But from that is understood, nidah refers to the period of menstruation. That's the word that's used. Devota, of her affliction. And you'll see that and again, I went to the trouble of looking at Onkelos to look at the translation and the Aramaic. I told you, this is not easy stuff, okay, on any kind of level. So she is going to be impure for 7 days, like the period of her menstrual affliction, okay? Just to finish up this verse, Titama, she shall be impure. So essentially the same kinds of laws that occur during the period of nidah, when a woman is in menstruation, apply when the first 7 days that follow the birth of a child.
Well, the birth of a male child.
Male child, yes, thank you.
And I'm wondering if those 7 days have any, besides the fact that they're the same 7 days, if they have any other connection to the days before the bris.
I have to let that go for now. I don't know that I can actually even comment on that for the moment, because I have to go through some other stuff. I mean, it's a great question, Lauren. I just can't answer it right this moment.
Right, that's okay.
Okay. Isha ki Tazri'ah. Okay. And here we go. This is in Vayikra Rabbah, the Midrash Vayikra Rabbah. Amar Rabbi Simlai. This is actually a lovely literary comment on the fact that what we just read about were the laws of kashrut and which animals are kosher and which animals are not kosher. And we also introduced the idea of impurity was introduced there in terms of the carcasses of certain animals, and quite possibly also if an animal dies, because it's killed. That is lovely. I don't know which cat is purring, but I'm very happy that the cat is appreciating this particular section of Torah. I
Oh,
take
that's
it,
mine.
I
Thank
take,
you. That's
I,
Shelley.
well, Shelley appears
Shelley.
to appreciate this part of the Rashi. Okay. Rabbi Simlai said, Kishem sheyitzirato shel Adam achar kol be'ema, just as the formation of man or Adam, right, followed all the animals, right? Behema, cattle, chaya, wild animals, va'of, and birds, b'ma'aseh bereshit, in the story of creation, kach Torato nitparsha. So likewise, the laws of, the instruction concerning human beings, nitparsha, is explained, achar Torat behema, after the laws regarding behema, chaya, va'of, after the domesticated animals, the wild animals, and the birds. So something connected there. Again, it's as an observation, it's an interesting observation. What the implications are of that observation may be cause for meditation. Again, I haven't meditated on it, so I don't have a lot to come up with, but just thought, it's certainly a lovely observation in terms of the literary flow of the Torah. Now, ki Tazri'ah, right? So this tough word, Tazri'ah, and this is from the tractate Nida. There's an entire tractate of the Gemara. It's the last tractate of the Babylonian Gemara, and it's on Nida. It is on all these particular subjects, all right? It says, Lerabot. This, to the fact that it says, ki Tazri'ah, Isha ki Tazri'ah, okay, lerabot, it's to include, to come into account, she'afilu yiladato machui, that even if she has a miscarriage, right, and the word machui literally means dissolved, so the fetus is not formed, even if she gives birth to she miscarries, shenimche v'nasa ke'ein zera, because the seed is dissolved and is made ke'ein zera. So that's the point that it says isha ki tazri'ah, right? It could have said ki teled ben. It could have used different language, which would have, and actually Torah Temimah discusses that particular issue very well. All right, but the fact that it said zera, right, imot me'a leda. Nevertheless, she has to experience the impurity of a regular birth. Now, again, you want to just really suspend judgment as to what the implications are of this impurity, right? It's too easy to jump off and say, well, impure, that's a bad thing. You've got to hold off. Impurity is a state, and it's not necessarily good and it's not necessarily bad. It has some negative consequences, but it also has positive consequences. So we have to be careful about that. Going on, Kimei nidat dvota. So, like the days of her separation, devota. So this is the word devota that he's going to talk about. Titama, she shall be impure. It's the end of the sentence, right? End of the pasuk. So why is it saying this? Why is it comparing the woman's condition after birth to her menstruation? It says because it's teaching you keseder kol tuma ha'amura, just as the laws, right? All those laws that regarding her impurity, which are stated benida, okay, when she's in menstruation, mit'am'a betum'at leda. Likewise, she is going to follow those particular laws when she gives birth. V'afilu niftach hakever belo dam. And the point about this, saying it, this sort of emphasis means, and miftach hakever means even if her vagina there's no blood involved. And it's interesting that they use the word kever, which means grave, literally means grave. And it occurred to me that, in a sense, the origin of all bigotry has to do with, in a sense, a deep, deep psychological fear that men may have regarding their relationship and the attraction to women. And this sort of, it's obviously, there's a lot of heavy psychological stuff that goes on as to why they should pick that word, okay? And this connection of death and sexuality, right? That are clearly connected there. So, there could be a whole, doctoral dissertation about this kind of stuff. But I sense that, the reason why women were treated in this unfair way on the part of men had to do with this deep psychological fear that men had of women. Because when a man is in love, falls in love to such a degree, at least maybe I shouldn't even call it in love, right? Is in lust, right? They lose their sense of rationality. Again, not necessarily a bad thing, but unfortunately, I think that the whole notion of bigotry and that kind of treatment sort of stems from this particular experience. And obviously, I'm leaving myself open to criticism and correction, and I'm open to it. It just occurs to me, because of this strange, synonym, right, or metaphor for this. Dvorta. Rashi analyzes this word dvorta. So the letter Dalet in Hebrew, I believe, often becomes a Zion. It's related to the letter Zion. If you actually pronounce the word Z and Da, you notice they're both in the same part of your mouth. And so they're related to each other. So he says, Lashon Davar, it has the connotation of something hazav. See that? That flows migufa, from her body. Lashon acher, lashon madve. There's the dalet and the vav. So madve has to do with affliction, holy, illness. And he says, and you can say Rashi didn't know what he was talking about, although it seems to me that Rashi did know what he was talking about. Remember, he had daughters. He didn't have any sons. He had daughters. She'ein isha ro'adam, that a woman does, this is, ro'adam means sees blood, but it's referring to her menstrual cycle. That's, again, it's just trying to use euphemistic language to describe this. Shelo techale rosha, whenever she experiences a menstruation, she feels her head, shelo techale rosha, she has a headache, ve'evare, and kvedim aleha, or unless it's tchila, shelo, nope, I think it's techale, from choli, to be ill. Her head, so a headache, the evareha, and her limbs, kvedim aleha, feel heavy on her. So that's, understanding the word dvorta, meaning her affliction, her menstrual affliction. And we're going to have to stop here.
Okay, I had, the chat isn't letting me say what I said to you for everyone.
Okay.
Just speaking to you in the chat. So above, when it said ovulate, maybe it's when she's fertile.
I'm not sure exactly what you're getting at. Please, I'm sorry.
When we first began.
Yes. Oh, are you saying, oh, I see. So you're trying to translate the
Yeah.
Hebrew as when a woman is fertile?
Yes.
Tazri'ah. It's a cool way of looking at it. I agree, because of course, fertile and seed and that kind of thing is lovely.
Because if
yeah.
you, yeah, because if you ovulate during intercourse, that's like just a specific sparking moment. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they were wanting to discuss that phenomenon, or that she was fertile during intercourse.
Yeah. I like that. I really do. It does. I can tell you, as we go through more things, you'll see that it is talking about, it isn't just sort of talking about a state, which I think of as fertility being a state that a woman is in and experiencing. It's talking about a specific, it's as if they say that just as a man ejaculates, that a woman also is ejaculating in a sense. Of course, it's the wrong word, but at least it gives you a sense of what it's talking about. By the way, of
I'm
course,
just going back to the word that you're using, ovulates.
right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, I
you know,
know.
I'm not sure. You might want to look at that sentence to see if it is saying that it was a very special, because that's very rare for a woman to ovulate.
Then we will say,
That-
I'll take out the word. Okay. But it
Yeah,
does.
I was wondering why the word was staying.
Okay.
A
Okay.
couple of commentaries say it just means conceives.
I know. It's a way.
And
I know.
Now
That is-
that's
one of
lovely.
them-
yeah.
but
But
one of them says, the Sforno actually says, to goes more into kind of a physiological description of a woman
Mhm.
providing something more like seed.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Right. So conceive, remember, is how the Targum translates it. But
Yeah.
this is not easy. We're talking here about a word in Hebrew in the Torah that is trying to describe an activity, an action. And it's not easy, because it's not the way we tend to describe, coitus.
The Torah always says v'tahar v'teled, right? So
Mhm.
the question is, are there other places in the Torah where it says Tazri'ah instead of v'tahar?
I don't know. I honestly, I can't think of such. All
So
right.
what are you writing? Provides what?
I don't know.
I don't know what
would
you were
tell-
writing. Provides instead of fertile.
Right.
don't-
That's a literal translation.
Provides seed during intercourse. Okay, I mean, could it be that the seed was there being, protected until the sperm came together with the seed?
Somehow okay, we'll have to stop here, right? I have to stop.
Because if she provides the seed during intercourse, then it is that she's ovulating. But if she's fertile during intercourse, then that could happen. She could conceive then.
Okay, well, I think what you're saying is helpful. I really do. I don't think it is exactly the meaning of what's going on here. So let's just keep it open. All right, and it's now 8 o'clock, so I'm going to stop the share. Okay, and let me. Okay, yes.
And there's Irv.
Yeah. Okay, and let's stop the recording. Thank you.